Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, I love that. Thank you. My name's Alison Beyea. I'm the Executive Director of the Goldfarb Center for Public Affairs, and I am so pleased to welcome you to the third of our In the News series. We have a lot of students here today, very excited. We have a lot of faculty here up in the faculty grandstand, so happy to have you here. And of course, we're mostly excited that we have Amy Walter with us today.
Thank you. Hi, guys.
Woo. So Amy is an extraordinarily well-respected political analyst. She is the editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. She is a commentator on PBS's NewsHour. She is on CNN. She's on Fox. I don't know where you're not. She's everywhere. She has an incredible career that people trust her. And I say that because it's important. But I also want to say that what is one of the most amazing things about Amy is she is an incredible human being.
Thank you.
She is kind, she is thoughtful, she is so loyal to this college. She is class of 91, our favorite year.
The best year.
The best year. Come on, class of 91.
Yeah, Rob.
She's a trustee of the college. She earned an honorary degree. And so when you all look at our alums and you think about your careers, yes, you absolutely can achieve the kinds of things Amy has achieved in her career. But my hope for you is that you also would continue to live in the world the way Amy does, which is just as an outstanding person. So I'm really happy to be here with you.
Thank you. And I'm really happy to be here with you guys.
Yeah.
Especially this group. I love this group, but you guys.
Yeah. And we're also really excited today to have Shane Baldwin, who is class. Team Shane is in the house, and Shane is class of 25. He's a government and Spanish major. And for those of you who don't know, he was also selected to be part of the Hill to Hill cohort through the Goldfarb Center and was an intern at the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. So we're really happy to have you here with us today, Shane, as well.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you, Amy. Just as a disclaimer, the last time I was with Amy, I was watching her from the control room at PBS and NBC, and now somehow I'm up on stage with her. So bear with me, but let's just get right into the questions. So Amy, not since 1892 when Grover Cleveland won his second presidential term in non-consecutive presidential elections, have we had a rerun election like we're about to have between former President Trump and incumbent President Biden. So it feels like we've been here before because we have.
Yeah.
What is different from 2020 to 2024 leading up?
Thank you, Shane. And hi, everyone. Yeah, I've been covering politics a long time. I don't go all the way back to 1892. Sometimes it feels like that, but not. So none of us really know what we're getting into, even those of us who've been around for quite some time. To me, you're right. It is very challenging when you think about the fact that you have two incumbents basically running against each other. Normally, when you have an incumbent president versus a challenger, the choice for voters is, do you want to stay the course or go in a different direction? Do you want to go with an incumbent or try somebody new? In this case, do you want 4 more years of Biden or do you want 4 more years of Donald Trump? Now, what's interesting about where this race starts today is very simply, Biden is much less popular today than he was back in 2020. By his favorable ratings, he's about 23 points, seen 23 points less favorably. That's a pretty significant drop. His overall job approval rating, do you think you're doing a good job as president? Are you doing a bad job as president? It's lower than any president in modern times at this point who's in their presidencies who would go to win a second term. His job approval rating is even a little bit lower than, say, where Donald Trump's was at this point. He's sort of at the point where George H.W. Bush was at this point, which, by the way, he went on to lose, where Gerald Ford was at this point, which, of course, he went on to lose. So this is not a good place to be as an incumbent president, even though we're this far out from the election. So he's much less popular. Donald Trump isn't any more popular today than he was back in 2020, but there's this sort of nostalgia for the Trump presidency. And by that I mean when you ask people the question about, do you think the economy was better? Yeah, I do think the economy was a lot better when Trump was president. Do you think that his policies whose policies do you think were better for you, Biden or Trump? Trump wins on that question. Who do you think would do a better job on the economy? Back in 2020, Trump was ahead on that question by about 5 or 6 points. Today it's double digits. It's, in some cases close to 20 points. To me, the most, if I'm the Biden campaign, the most troubling number, though, beyond that they think that the economy was better when Trump was president, there was a question asked in 2020 and today on the NBC poll, and it asked, do you think that, who do you think would be more effective and competent as president? Back in June of 2020, Biden won that by 9 points. Today, or actually it was earlier this year, Trump was ahead on that question by 16 points. So so when we're talking about incumbent versus incumbent, right now, people are feeling more comfortable with what it was like to have Donald Trump's presidency, not him personally necessarily. As I said, they don't feel differently about that, but they feel that if we're going to compare what my life was like in 2020 to what my life is like now, that 2020 was better, and that means that Trump gets the credit for it. The challenge then, if you're the Biden campaign, is you have to tell people that actually, you can't tell people that what they're feeling is wrong. Like, your perception of your time there, don't you remember how terrible it was? Instead, they've really got to make the race as much about Donald Trump, who he is and was, and what he stands for and what he will do as president, as much as it is about Joe Biden selling himself and what he's been able to do.
Is it thinking about, you and I both got out of college in 91 and thinking about the 92 election, right? Yeah. Where, Clinton, it's all about James Carville, right?
It's all about the
economy, right? And there seems to be a disconnect there, right? The economic numbers don't necessarily line up with the polling. But before we get to that,
yes,
and we dig into that, the title of our conversation today is, what are going to be the deciding factors of the election, yes, and sort of what are you seeing in the polls? But before you tell us what we want to know, I want to know what you all know. So what do you all think pick one issue you think is going to be the deciding factor, like the most important issue in the campaign? Just shout it out. What do you think is going to be important? What? The border. Okay. What else? Reproductive freedom. What else? Criminal justice.
We got a student debt.
Student debt.
Inflation and cost of living.
Okay.
Israel government.
Okay. Anything else? Sorry? Okay.
Yeah.
Those are
great.
We got a great start.
Those are great.
Oil prices.
Oil. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how he does this.
All right, that gives us a lot to work with.
Yeah, that is.
What do you think, Amy?
You all gave correct answers. The thing about politics that is important to appreciate, I love that you all are here. You're spending your free time learning about this, talking about it. Maybe you're engaging outside of this room about it. And I say this lovingly. You're not normal, all right? I mean that just, again, full heart, not normal. Meaning the people who are going to decide this election are not thinking about this election. Now, some of that is because there are a lot of people, probably a record number, are going to go into this election disliking both candidates, saying, this is a lesser of two evils election to me, and I don't want to have to think about this election until I very much have to. So I don't want to talk about it now. I'll talk about, Green Day's anthem from the early 2000s, Wake Me Up When September Ends, is kind of the anthem that I'm going by, which is a lot of folks will start cluing in and keying into the election when we get there. If the election were today, I think that the issues that all those issues that you raised are critically important. but we don't know what people are going to be the most focused on when we get to September and October. Are we still going to be talking about Gaza and the Middle East? We may be. It may still be as dramatic and as horrific as it is today, or maybe we're not. It's something that was really important. It's still important, but it's not front and center the way it is today. How are we talking about inflation? Things are still going down. Did we get a rate cut? Are consumers feeling better, more positively? That helping Biden. What is happening on the border? Has it gotten worse? There's been reporting that Biden is going to come out by the end of this month with some pretty clear and probably within his own base unpopular moves to stem the flow of migration, specifically this issue of being able to seek asylum. So are we still talking about that in the same way? What if there's a big hurricane? What if a meteor strikes the Earth? I don't know. What if we have a pandemic, right? All of these things. But I do think it's important to appreciate that while all of those are really important issues, where the center is in September and October becomes so important. Now, we're sowing a lot of seeds right now about how people are feeling about abortion. Isn't going to change between now and October, or how you feel about Gaza, or how you feel about a whole bunch of other issues. But is it the most important thing to you going into the election, especially if you're somebody who's not really paying all that much attention to who you're going to vote for?
Makes sense.
And just given that you just mentioned, and we got word from the audience too of the issue of abortion, in some of your recent articles, you've mentioned the states with ballot initiatives, meaning that questions about abortion will be on the ballot in some states like Florida, Maryland, New York, and possibly Arizona and Nevada. So how will this issue serve as possible turnout engine and drive voters coming to the polls in those states?
Yeah, there's no doubt that it is a turnout engine. The question in my mind is, how many of those people who turn out and vote in support of abortion rights how are they voting for other candidates? So I'll give you this great example that I saw in a poll recently. The Kaiser Family Foundation, they do great work on healthcare issues, and they polled people, asked them about abortion, and one question they asked was, do you think Donald Trump's responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade? Like, how responsible is he? Now, not surprisingly, almost every Democrat's like, absolutely. Most independents felt that way. Republicans were evenly divided. And the ones who were the most conflicted on that question were people who identified themselves as Republican, but also basically pro-choice. And the reason is that you have to, right, like, politics is cognitive dissonance. You have to make a binary choice with a lot of conflicting information. If you already identify yourself really closely with one party or the other, and then your party does something that conflicts with a value of yours, you gotta decide what you're gonna do with that. And so in many cases, what you do is you then find a way to rationalize it, right? Like, well, I mean, it wasn't really Donald Trump, it was really actually technically the Supreme Court, and I mean, that wasn't really him, and I think, you know, or even if it was, what's more important to me is that Trump is strong on the border, right? Like, you find a way to justify that. I talked to another pollster the other day who's doing polling in Arizona, and they're saying, like, a good 20% of the people who are gonna show up and vote for enacting the enshrining abortion rights into law in that state are voting for Donald Trump, right? So you can find a way to differentiate between supporting a candidate and supporting an issue. I think where it becomes really problematic for Republicans, it is definitely challenging for Republicans. Of all the issues that you guys mentioned, most of those are good for Republicans right now, but abortion is not. And for down ballot candidates, so you're running for the House, you're running for the Senate, a lot of them, either were incumbents back then, or they maybe were running, or they've been in other jobs where they've been asked about abortion. And pre-Dobbs, if you were a Republican, you kind of got a free pass because you could say stuff, but you're like, well, whatever. We've got Roe v. Wade. This probably isn't going to happen. Well, guess what? Now you don't. And there are people who've said on the record, oh, yeah, I think we should have no exceptions. I think that's a great idea. Or, yeah, national abortion ban, sure. Now those folks have to try to justify that. And that's a lot harder when you're not as well known and sort of well established in terms of a brand as somebody like Donald Trump or Biden. So I think it is again, in some of these states and some of these places where it is going to be a centerpiece issue that is very helpful for Democrats. There are other places where the issue is going to be important, but it may not rise to that. It may not be the deciding factor for voters in the same way.
So I want to get your all voices in the room faster than we did in the last couple because you've been asking such incredible questions. So get yourself thinking. We have one microphone for you all to come to. But while you're preparing, I would love to just ask you a question as you get ready to ask your questions. Professor Jacobs is in the room, and Professor Jacobs and Dan Shea just had a book come out about rural voting, right? Amazing. Just had a great article in Politico.
Yep.
And I mean, I think you talk about the dissonance we have, right? And I also think a lot about how we like to lump voters, right, into certain ways of being. I mean, lumping usually doesn't go well for anything, but
It's also a terrible word.
It's a terrible word.
Lump. No one wants that.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now that we've lumped people together, you've spent a lot of time studying races across the country, right? You're in every state. We're just talking about how you've talked about every race in every state. No one else is doing that. So what do you think about how the rural-urban divide is being sort of capitalized on, used, lumped, and what do you see? How do you see that playing out?
I wanted to send this, maybe I will, Nick, to you, this ad that I just highlighted of, this is a candidate running in West Virginia, and his whole pitch is, the elites look down on us. No, we don't have, fancy this and fancy that. We have just a great way of living. We have a real life here, and that's what we're here to protect. And this idea of sort of us versus them, it's the easiest political tool you can use, right? I'm for you guys. These people want to ruin the way you live. Or alter the way that you live. So it's been a ploy. This is not something new. This has been used forever and ever and ever. I think what we're finding more and more, though, and this election is going to be fascinating about that, is that the nuance of voters is really going to be on stark display. And this is especially true for younger voters and for voters of color. And let's face it, when we talk about sort of longitudinal studies of voters, we're usually talking about white voters, and we spend a lot of time talking about the college versus non-college divide and how important that is. But it's really been among white voters. Now we're seeing real interesting divisions within groups of voters who aren't white. That, again, we've been making assumptions or we've been lumping. And we're starting to see those same elements that we've talked about with white voters, whether it's college education, whether it's ideology, whether it's place, where you live, where you grew up. We've talked about religion for a long time, but now we're seeing it not just with white voters, but evangelical Latino voters. Also behaving very similarly to evangelical white voters. So this is what I think has really been, it's easy to look and say, all right, well, we have red and blue America, and so that's just how, and it's incredibly, in some ways, boring, all right? When I 125 years ago when I started, we had 100 members of Congress that represented split districts. Like they were a Democrat, but a Republican won their district, or or vice versa. Now we have 35 of those people. There are fewer senators now that represent a state won by the opposite party than I think since the direct election of senators back at the turn of the 20th century. So we're more red-blue divided than we've ever been, but it also, so it means we have this incredible amount of stability in our politics, but that means that it also leads to an incredible amount of volatility because there's not a lot of cushion. If you've got like 47% on each side dug in, then just this tiniest shift of people who aren't dug in or the dug in people who stay home, choose to stay home instead of turning out, has huge consequences. All it takes is 5 seats shifting in the House and somebody else is the speaker, although by the end of this week, somebody else could be the speaker, because apparently that's a new thing now. We'll just get a new speaker every few months. So, same with the Senate, same with the president, right? 42,000 votes, that's it. That was the difference between Donald Trump winning and Joe Biden winning. So it is this fascinating place that we sit that I'm sure is going to be on even just I hope we do a better job of appreciating the nuances within those communities and within that red and blue, rather than just saying the red got redder and the blue got bluer.
Right.
Yeah. All right, you guys.
All right, guys.
Let's go.
We got one microphone.
Come on. All right.
Yes.
I also love, can I just say, this is what I miss about Colby, is that, you guys, it's 55 degrees out, and you're wearing shorts, and I love it. And I love it, because I did that too. Me, it's like 75 degrees back home, and I'm wearing layers, so good on you.
My name's Wilson. I'm a first year. My question is, how does Donald Trump win back the white suburban female vote, since that's pretty much what doomed him in 2020?
Yeah, excellent question. And my short answer to you is I don't think he does, and I don't think he has much interest in doing so. He makes up for what he loses with those voters, with voters of color, that he is bringing on who are, again, they don't like him necessarily, but they feel as if he can deliver on the things that are important to them. Or they don't necessarily like him, but they also think Biden isn't up to the job. The trade-off, though, when you're making this is the gamble both sides are making. So the Biden campaign gamble is we can turn out all those people who showed up in 2018, 2020, 2022, where abortion rights was an issue, Donald Trump's behavior was an issue, January 6th was an issue. And if you turned out and voted for Joe Biden or Democrats in all of those years, you're going to show up in 2024 and you're not going to vote for Donald Trump. Like, how have you suddenly decided, like, all those things that really upset me they don't matter now? Of course they do. All right. But there are a lot of people who didn't show up in 2018. Maybe they showed up in 2020 or not, and they didn't show up in 2022. They are much more, we're seeing this in a lot of polling, those folks who are not considered active voters, people who come in and out of voting, they are more Trump curious and maybe lean more Trump. If all those people turn out, that's really good for Donald Trump. But one of the best predictors of voting is that you voted, right? If you are a voter, you're more likely to vote. If you're not a voter, you're not as likely to show up and vote. So are those people actually gonna show up? They're telling pollsters, like, I don't know, maybe but if by the end of the day, we know that the white suburban woman, she's voting. Like, there's absolutely no way she's not voting. Do we know that about that other group? And so that's the trade-off that they're making. And if you're Team Biden, you're trying to keep all of those people, not necessarily that turned out before, you're trying to keep them not necessarily from voting for Trump, but from voting for a third party, or saying, this is stupid, why should I even bother to vote, right? That's what we're hearing from your age cohort. Poll after poll, voters under 25 saying, I don't like these choices, I can't believe we have to do this again, I'm not excited about this election. How many people are excited about this election? Okay, all right.
We got
I'm proud of you.
people.
I'm proud of you guys. Thank you. Do you want to come work for us? We're looking for your posts. All right, so basically, you're probably a good representative sample of that. If you could pick a candidate, is there somebody out there that you're like, I wish this person were running? Is there anyone that comes to mind? Who did you say? Charlie Baker. Okay.
Not even a politician. Like,
Not anymore, but you want that kind of,
like more in the middle, like a Republican in a blue state, someone who sort of
yeah, who had to sort of trim their sails. Yeah. Phil Scott, another moderate Republican.
Maybe Manchin.
Joe Manchin. Yeah. Okay, you guys are all talking about centrists who could kind of go into the middle. What about folks, so you don't feel like Democrats are nominating people who are too centrist? You want somebody who's a little less, beyond the, all right, how much of a factor is age for you guys? Big? Huge?
Yeah, raise your
Okay.
hand if it's, raise your
Okay.
hand.
Like if
Wait, we got the faculty raising their hands too.
All right.
All right, we got it.
if Joe Biden were like 20 years younger, would that change your opinion of him? That's it, just if he were 20 years younger. If he were what?
More competent.
Like if you were to be operating at the kind of cognitive speed that he was 20 years ago.
Okay, right. Just let's assume we could go and put him in like a time machine, like, but he would be doing everything else similarly, all right? Like all the policies would be the same, the way he acts. I mean, you know, he's always been a little like not the most articulate. But take away he looks old, he kind of walks like an old man-ish situation, you'd be cool with that. Okay, right, kinda, right. Do you wish they'd nominated somebody else, Democrats? You do, but see, who would it be? It's not gonna be Phil Scott, it's not gonna be Joe Manchin, sorry. Pete Buttigieg.
Okay.
Oh, we like Pete, okay. Newsom. Whitmer, okay.
Nobody for Bernie. Too old?
Too old.
Okay.
What about Warren?
Warren.
You like Warren? I mean, she's not young either, but, okay. Yeah, Bernie is gonna be older than
I know.
Biden, which is amazing. To think about.
Yeah.
I guess I have one question, and obviously we're talking about 47% divide both sides, but there is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as
know.
this third-party candidate, and he doesn't say he's centrist, he doesn't really say he's left
He
or
doesn't
right,
say he's
and
anything.
it seems like commentators every day are going back and forth on whose votes
Yeah.
he might steal. So
Yeah.
do you have any answer to that?
I know. My one answer is to the question of who does he steal more from. The fact that Democrats have put together an entire operation designed just to go after him tells you which side is the most worried, right? Like that you go to who's doing what as a sign of that. I mean, on paper, let me rewind for a minute. When you've got such a significant portion of the electorate saying, like, I would literally rather chew glass than have to vote for one of these candidates. You're going to get a bunch of people who park themselves either in undecided or a third-party candidate. And why not put yourself in the camp of a guy whose last name's Kennedy, right? Like, okay, sure, yeah, that sounds fine. I don't think they know much about him. It's not saying that these voters are stupid. They're just feeling like if somebody calls you and asks you, you want to vote for Trump or Biden? Okay, there's also this guy named Robert Kennedy Jr. Yeah, okay, fine, put me in that camp. the election goes forward, it looks as if he's going to be on ballots that matter. Michigan, Arizona, Nevada. So you as a campaign can't ignore him, which I think the Clinton campaign did in 2016, and that obviously had dire consequences. Here's my take on all of this. The challenge for Biden is he has a much lower floor than Donald Trump does, meaning his base is just not as cohesive and supportive of him. Part of the challenge that Biden has long had is that he is not a candidate that people are voting for, much as people are coming out to vote against Donald Trump. And the way that you keep your base together and your coalition together is you have to make the election then less about you and more about the other person. It's kind of where Trump started too. Trump won in 2016, not because everybody loved Donald Trump, but because the people said, I voted for Trump because I didn't want Hillary. The difference between these two candidates who turned president, though, is, and I was looking at these numbers the other day and wrote about this. So, according to NBC polling, going into the election, majority of Trump voters in 2016 said, I'm voting for him because I don't like Hillary. But by the time we get to the election of 2020, 75% of Trump voters are like, no, I'm voting for him. All right, so he turned those anti-Hillary voters into pro-Trump voters. Not so true with Biden. You go into that election, again, NBC polling 2020, 36% I'm pro-Biden, the rest I'm anti-Trump. Beginning of January, it's the same number. About 36% are pro-Biden, the rest are anti-Trump. So he doesn't have that same, that's why he has as I said, a lower floor. Mm-hmm. And if you get 36% of people coming out for you. But I think my theory right now is Trump is doing as well as he's ever done, certainly in 2016 or in 2020. He is better positioned politically. But is he still up against his ceiling? I think he has a lower ceiling, higher floor, lower ceiling. But meaning he's getting all the people he's going to get. And he now has nowhere to go. Either he goes down or he stays there and still wins because a third-party candidate pulls enough away that you can win with 47% or 48%. You don't need to hit 50% of the vote. And that's where, if I'm the Biden campaign, any third-party candidate, whether it's RFK, whether it is Cornel West, whether it is a Green Party candidate, whether it is this pair of glasses, whatever it is, he can't afford any of those people who are anti-Trump to not vote for him. They have to come out and vote only for him, not for a third party. So that splitting of the anti-Trump vote is really critical. Now, on paper, RFK Jr. should be pulling from Trump. He's like a very much in that category of Trump-esque voters. He's like a Joe Rogan type dude. A lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of stuff of like getting, I think he appeals to a certain type of Trump voter. But not a lot of people who are not following this race know much about it.
Right, with a legacy name as well.
Right, with a big
name
legacy name.
All of us know,
Right.
each generation.
Well, kind of. I mean, do you know who, like when you hear Robert F. Kennedy,
You know the
are
Kennedys?
you like, okay, I knew that.
Okay.
All right, well, that's better than.
We are in
Most
New England,
Americans. I know.
and we draw heavily
Fair.
from Massachusetts. What else we got? Come on up. Go ahead, you got time for both of you.
Hi, I'm Aubrey. I was wondering if you're thinking that this is more of a relatively isolated, temporary period of political instability, or do you think that this is a fundamental shift in the way we're going to do politics from now on?
Okay, and so tell me what you mean, like the kinds of candidates, or the fact that we're in this sort of red-blue?
A little bit of both. Mostly like the types of candidates we're putting forward and the behavior that we think is acceptable in the political arena, or what we're thinking is going to be motivating for voters.
Yeah, Excellent question. I think a lot of Republicans after this era are going to assume that the only way to win is to be like Donald Trump. But guess what? Only Donald Trump has been successful. And I think what we saw in places in 2022, like Pennsylvania and Michigan and others, is these people that are trying to emulate Trump's style and behavior, but they're not him. It doesn't work. You have to give, every president, to get to that level, to be able to, first of all, make it through the process and then be elected is really, really hard. It looks easier on paper. Just ask Ron DeSantis, right? On paper, he was the perfect candidate. He had everything. He had money, he had press attention, he had so much money, right? You gotta do that. Donald Trump in many ways came out of nowhere, but he really didn't. And it was the perfect candidate for this moment, because what he had done in an era pre all of these things was he was a household name. He had basically learned how to make media get that level now, what we call like viral attention. He did it in New York. He did it with The Apprentice, and he created a persona that transcended traditional politics. So, one of the hardest things, and I remember talking to Democrats about this in 2016, they kept trying to tell voters about his record as an actual businessman, right? Like, he keeps saying all these things, but he's been bankrupt this many times. He's been sued this many times. He doesn't actually have that much money. There's all this fraud. Oh, he made all of his stuff in China, right? And voters would be like, well, that's not true. I'm like, well, we can show you. And they're like, have you seen The Apprentice? He's really rich. Or I go back, my son was like, well, he is really rich. And I said, well, why do you say? He goes, he has a plane, right? I mean, the dude has his own plane. If you have your own plane, by definition, you are successful. The end. Don't tell me all the rest of it. So no one else could do that. But if somebody new comes onto the scene, we're going to be like, well, who? I don't know this Alison part. Yeah, I don't trust that. I don't know much about her. So it's harder to do that than he can. So I do think you're going to get a lot of candidates who think they can just pull that off, and it's not going to work. It's really not. Democrats and Republicans also want very different kinds of people as their candidates. Democrats love technocrats, love a Pete Buttigieg. He's so smart. He likes government, like he's right out of West Wing, idealistic, young. He has got experience. He ran a city. That's so awesome. Republicans are like, I want an outsider. I want a business person. I want someone who's going to like blow up government. I don't want them to be a technocrat. Technocrats are the problem. So we are going to, they do want different things. Somebody that they think would be a successful president is very different. Again, it's not one that's right or wrong. It's just they want very different things. The part that really comes back to you guys is we are in a period that is, for you, this is normal. This is all you've known, this kind of politics. For those of us who've been around a little longer, this feels like an anomaly. We're not going to be around forever. You guys are going to be moving into these positions, and I think you're the ones who have to decide what you want our politics to look like next. And the fact is, these things have changed everything, and I think we still don't totally appreciate and understand that. And when you have people in their 80s being the president, I don't care how smart you are or how many people you have around you who understand technology, like your whole mindset is still like mid-20th century. And that's really where most of our politics is stuck, is mid-20th century. And the post-World War II sort of has been capture it in time as like, that is the ideal way of doing things. We created these systems and these policies when America was the leader of the free world and had literally just saved the world from the Nazis and the horror, right? So that's where we were. That is not the world today. And making that transition into what the 21st century is what you guys get to do and get to help figure out. But we are at that hinge point, and it doesn't, and you can see it on Gaza, right? How you feel about what's happening there is as much about your age as almost anything else. And so the kinds of issues, the way you communicate is going to determine the kind of politics that we get to next. But some of the things that we do know, and this is the challenge, you know, we've always had a urban-rural divide. We've always had a college, non-college divide. They've become exacerbated in part because of our society and the way the economy works, but some of it has been exacerbated really because people take advantage of it to do not great things, or using it to leverage their own power. And so it's not so much that, oh my gosh, we're so divided, we'll never come back together. It's like, well, or you elect leaders who say, my job is gonna be to not just push on those all the time. We're not necessarily gonna make everybody hold hands and love each other, but we can not lean into the division.
Deb, do you want to get up there and get your question in?
Hi, my name is Dev Browett, class of 25. I just wanted to ask, what role do you think the vice president is going to play in this role, in this upcoming race? And if, in your mindset, what should the Trump camp be looking for in a vice presidential candidate, and do you think that's going to affect the upcoming election?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I get asked this question, and I feel like I'm not giving a satisfactory answer, so you guys tell me what you think. Normally, all right, well, can I tell you a story? Do we have time for a funny story? So I was at ABC News for a while, and one of my jobs as political director there, is 2012 presidential campaign, was to put reporters in and embed them into the campaigns, right? So it's like, all right, your job, Deb, is you're gonna be on the Romney campaign, and you're on the Romney bus, and you have to cover everything about that campaign. And after Romney wins the nomination, then we move on to the vice president, which I told everyone, I was like, I don't really fucking care who the vice president is. Like, we'll find out soon enough. Oh, we gotta break the story. We wanna be the ones that break the vice president's story. It's like, all right, fine, I'll do that. So then these poor people had to go and like trek around with people we thought might be the vice president. Now, Paul Ryan was on that list. And thankfully he now has a nice job, but I sent this poor kid to like sit in front of Paul Ryan's house in a car for just days on end. That's all he did. He was like his stalker in front of his house. Now, they knew they came to like know each other, right? Like, how you doing, Congressman? Hey, how you doing? Right, like sitting there every day, because we had to know who's gonna be the vice president. And so it's like all the rumors are going around that Romney's gonna be picking, and it's gonna be very soon, and Ryan's on the list. And then it starts leaking that like, oh, he picked Paul Ryan. So I'm calling this reporter of mine who's sitting outside of his house. I was like, what is happening? They're telling me that Paul Ryan is like flying to Virginia. What do you know? He's like, no, Paul Ryan is in the house. Like, I literally saw him walk in his house. That's not possible. The lights are on, people are walking around. He has not left the house. I was like, oh, are you sure he hasn't left the house? Yeah, I'm sure he hasn't left the house. Well, sure enough, the next day, he's in Virginia, right? I was like, what? So, yeah, my guy is sitting out there Paul Ryan comes in, walks down the driveway, greets my reporter. It's like, hey, how you doing? He's like, great. He goes in through the side yard. And of course you think, all right, well, he's in the house and I'll go back into my car. No, that's not what he did. They'd set up this whole elaborate scheme. There are woods behind his house. He goes through the woods to a car waiting on the other side that has his family and all his stuff, and they drive to a teeny tiny little airport somewhere in Wisconsin that nobody would say, oh, look to this airport to see if he's flying out of. They brought people in the house to like walk around so it looked like they were there, all right? All of this to say that maybe this is why I dislike the vice presidential process, because that was so annoying. But I feel like we have two very well-known candidates that, yes, both of whom are in their older years. So technically, the vice president should count more, because you're like, no, for once, this could kind of like matter who they are. At the same time, I don't know that many voters are you really saying right now, like, I was gonna vote for Biden, but I don't really think Kamala Harris could do the job, so now I'm voting for Trump? Probably not. Now, could you sit out? Yeah, perhaps. But, and then there's with Trump, like, I really don't like him. I disagree with a lot of his policies or the way he behaves. Oh, but he picked this person that's changed my opinion about him. I don't know. But I do think for Trump, there are two ways to think about how he makes his decision. One, he does love doing this, because for him it is like The Apprentice, and he loves people coming and performing for him. But you have to be unflailingly loyal, and even then, it doesn't guarantee that you might not be hanged by a mob at the Capitol. So, unflailingly loyal. You can't have any ambitions of your own, which, remember, he's going to be a one-term president if he's elected. So if you're a young vice president, you're thinking about, I'll be positioned well in 2028. And you can't overshadow him, right? So you've got to be really appealing, but not too appealing. And then you think, okay, so what strategic advantage can he have? There's one is, let's go try to win those women back, and put somebody on the ballot who could be attracted to those women. I mean, Nikki Haley would be perfect. He's not going to do that, right? Absolutely not. Or you say, I'm going to go try to win over those voters of color, and I'm going to put Tim Scott or a Latino Republican. Now, there's a lot of talk about Marco Rubio. Remember, Marco Rubio is from Florida. Donald Trump is also in Florida. You cannot have a ticket with two people from the same state. Last time this happened was in 2000. Dick Cheney moved to Wyoming so he could be on the ticket with Bush. Marco Rubio's a senator. It's not like he's like, oh, cool, no problem. I'll just move over to Louisiana, and then I'll be on the ticket with you. So I don't know exactly how that would work, but I think that's probably where he ends up going. And what it does do is it says to those voters, I'm serious about having somebody on my team who is from that community, and whether or not that helps, don't know.
We have time for probably one or two more questions. And then behind.
First of all, thank you so much for being here. Also, hi, Shane. This is a slightly tangential question, but it goes back to your discussion about like othering politics and doing like the whole like us versus them thing. Maybe I'm not observing this correctly, but in my observations has kind of led to a little bit more polarization and more kind of like radical ideologies that are coming up as far as like American politics. Do you think that there's like a limit to how much like could potentially, like how much people would be willing to be like separated, or is there going to be a point where people are going to eventually like, I guess, sort of dive back into more moderate policies, or is that?
Right. I mean, I thought the pandemic was going to do that. Remember? You're like, how perfect is this to bring people together? It's not about any people, right? It's about this disease. Like, we can all hate on diseases and, like, be united around that. And we come together as communities, and that lasted, like, 2 weeks that we came together. And then immediately it did become politicized, and it did become about people, right? Because it became a Chinese virus, and then that spiraled into anti-Asian violence. So, as I was saying earlier, I think the division is something that is getting promoted and now it can infiltrate us in so many more ways than ever before through these devices, and that is hard to do. But leaders can choose to encourage it, or they can choose to discourage it. And that's the role of being a good leader. The question too, I mean, this gets to the heart of what I think about a lot. You know, folks talk about, oh, this country, we've survived a lot, and yeah, we had the Civil War, and that was really bad, but like we came back together, and we've been doing this for like 200 years. We're cool, like we got it. But if you really think about the United States in terms of being not just a democracy, but a multi-ethnic, multi-racial democracy, it's really only about 60 years old, right? We didn't let women vote until the 1920s. We did not have full access for black voters in this country until the 1960s. So this is pretty new. It's not, we are still learning it. It's not back in 18 blah blah, that was a very homogeneous population making decisions, where we did have rural and urban divide and religious divides, but not a multi-ethnic, multi-racial democracy. Those things are really hard. They're really hard. And the US doesn't have a great track record for most of it. So I think we have to maybe appreciate that and understand that, and then go from there, rather than trying to compare us to an era where we didn't have those same pressures. I think, again, if you look at the Harvard poll came out this week, the youth poll, which is just a great resource. By the way, the head of the Harvard poll, his son is a Colby grad. There we go. Get that one in there. But they, you look at younger voters, no matter how they feel about politics, how they feel about immigrants, how they feel about sort of, again, a multiracial society, is so different than the older folks in the country. And they're not just, by the way, when they poll younger folks, they're not just polling Harvard kids or college kids, they're polling all 18 to 29-year-olds. So it is very refreshing to see that. But you gotta pull through that generational change. And we've not had a time in American history the difference between someone who's a baby boomer and the America that they grew up in and what that looked like, and you guys, and then the generation right behind you guys, is like mind-blowingly different in terms of the demographic makeup. So I feel better about that, as I said, because eventually you guys become the center of gravity.
Sorry, but I guess I'm kind of thinking but just like with the way the system is set up, it's such a powerful tool rhetorically,
Yeah.
just to other people.
Yeah, of course. It's always going to work. Like, will it never not work?
Exactly. So I guess my question is, do you think that there will ever be a point where the system will enable like more ethical practices as far as advocating for oneself and one's policies without sort of like, I guess, doing the like us versus them thing in a way that allows them to actually like win an election?
Well, I mean, you could argue we saw it in 2008, right? I mean, Barack Obama was a transformational candidate who was able to bring, right? It's not like the country was super like, woohoo, yay. We didn't just end up where we are today on accident, but as I said, what he did is he leaned into doing just that. I'm not going to other. And guess what else happened? John McCain did not make it about othering. He didn't say, if you elect Barack Obama, all these terrible things are going to happen because all the immigrants are going to come and all the black people are going to take your jobs and he's going to be with the radical, right, socialists. And he actively, that was the fight he had with Sarah Palin during that campaign, right? When people would stand up and say, he's a Muslim. And he'd go, what? No, he's not. He's a good American, right? Like, he's a Muslim, he hates America. No, he doesn't. He doesn't hate America. Now, what a lot of Republicans, especially the Sarah Palin wing of the party, took from that is, oh, right, when nice guys lose, they finish last. But if we see Biden win again in 2024, what is the message? That the one with the most divisive rhetoric won one time, 2016, but he and his party have lost every election since then. Now, it's not by a landslide margin, but it's still, you got to put W's on the board.
I think that's actually I want to give Shane the last question of
Yeah.
of our time together.
Yeah, well, just to close, obviously being here is a great first step for all of us, but the upcoming election will probably be a lot of our first time voting in a presidential election. So what would be your advice to just stay informed as we go into the summer and into next fall?
Yeah, my advice would be to give yourself the opportunity to engage with as much of smart, and it can be dialogue that maybe you don't agree with, but to not go, to your point, to not go straight to the like, get punching in the face kind of information. But if you do have people out there saying, okay, well, what's really going on the border? There are people that are doing really good work on this stuff, that are really thoughtful about this. You're in the middle of it, you are surrounded by scholars and people who do this full time. To use that opportunity to do that and to have those conversations that get us beyond just the, well, you're wrong, you're an idiot, because you know how to do that and do it really well. And also to be thinking about the ways in which, and I think for many of you, I don't know how many of you are planning to vote in Maine? And then how many of you are just keeping your home addresses? Oh, okay. So pretty much half and half. Get educated about the down ballot races. We don't talk enough about this, and I'm guilty of it too. Our national politics is just seeped into everything. And guess what really matters too? Like, what's happening at your school board? What is happening at your county commission? What's happening at the state legislature? Those state legislative bodies are doing more on abortion access, for one. Somebody brought up reproductive. They're doing more on that than we're going to see at the federal level. You're here at Colby, but a lot of the decisions about what the state is spending on education, not just the K through 12, but secondary education in these states, it's going through the state legislature. There's a lot of stuff that's important. So if you also say, like, I don't want to talk anymore about Trump and Biden, cool, don't. There's so many more things to talk about and think about, and you should, and get engaged on, and feel like you're making a difference. those folks who are like running for city council, that is a thankless job, but it's so, so important to the fabric of our society. So I appreciate that.
Well, as someone who spent their career in state politics, I really appreciate you ending on the importance of the state issues.
Yes, Anything go to Augusta. This is awesome.
That's right. So I want to thank you all so much for being here. Actually, it's a great tee-up for our last conversation, which is on Tuesday night with Colin Woodard. Colin Woodard is a former reporter at Politico at the Portland Press Herald. He is writing about these very questions about how our history is informing our current moment and whether the press, and how is the press actually going to cover this election. So please join us. And it wouldn't be one of our events without a raffle. So I think it looks like we have 3 winners.
We have 3 winners.
Would you like to announce our winners?
Softcover notebooks. So Kemp Elias, Ishani Nakulu, and Bryce Leos.
You are. Okay. And again, thank you all so much for joining us. Amy, amazing to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys. And Shane.